You ever see a dog freeze so suddenly that the whole world seems to freeze with him? 1 second the hallway was the same as always. Lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking on tile, kids laughing too loud before first period, and then Apollo stopped dead. Hackles up, ears forward. The German Shepherd's growl rose low and steady, enough to cut through all that teenage noise like a blade. And in that instant, everyone knew something wasn't right. Officer Ryan Cooper, standing just a few feet behind him, didn't brush it off. He'd learned the hard way in the Marines that when a dog like Apollo tells you something's wrong, you listen. These animals don't scare easy. And Apollo wasn't just sniffing gum wrappers or leftover lunch. No, this was different. The kids nearby stopped in their tracks. One freshman muttered, "Yo, is he gonna bite somebody?" Another laughed nervously, hugging his backpack closer. The sound of chatter in the hall thinned out as eyes darted from the dog to the row of lockers along the wall. Ryan's pulse ticked faster. He crouched low, one hand resting on the canine's vest, his voice firm but calm. "Easy, boy. Show me." Apollo pressed forward, nose driving toward locker number 217. His claws scratched at the metal, a sharp screech that made even the teachers wince. A warning bark exploded from his throat, bouncing off the cinder block walls. Not playful, not protective, aggressive, urgent. Ryan felt the air change. He'd been a school resource officer at Jefferson High for 2 years, long enough to know every face in these halls, every shortcut the kids thought adults didn't see. The morning usually meant breaking up harmless horseplay or reminding football players to get to class. Nothing that made his chest tighten like this. But Apollo had locked on to something, and if Apollo was this sure, Ryan knew better than to second guess. "Back up, everyone," Ryan ordered, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Give him space." Students shuffled away, backpacks bumping, whispers rising. Some pulled out their phones, recording like it was entertainment. The digital age had no filter. Kids filmed everything, even moments that might change lives. The principal, Mrs. Harper, hurried down the hallway in her sensible flats, hair pulled tight like a knot of worry. "Officer Cooper, what's going on?" Ryan didn't take his eyes off the dog. "Apollo's alerting on this locker. We need the master key." Mrs. Harper blinked. "Drugs?" Ryan shook his head slowly. "Doesn't look like it." His gut told him this was something darker. Apollo's growl had shifted. It wasn't the sharp bark he gave for marijuana or the excited whine for a snack hidden in a bag. This was deeper, more primal, the kind of sound that said danger. The janitor shuffled over, keys jangling. Ryan motioned for him to wait. He didn't want this opened until the hall was cleared. "All of you, class, now," Mrs. Harper snapped, her voice shaking just enough to reveal her nerves. A few kids lingered, hungry for drama, until she clapped her hands sharply. "Move it!" The hallway thinned until it was just Ryan, Apollo, Mrs. Harper, and the janitor. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Ryan's mind ran through scenarios. A weapon? A bomb? Something smuggled in that shouldn't be here? He crouched again, locking eyes with the dog. "What do you smell, buddy?" Apollo answered with another bark that reverberated in Ryan's chest. His paw scratched furiously at the bottom seam of the locker, claws clicking on metal. He wasn't giving up. The janitor fumbled nervously with the keyring. "Should I?" Ryan nodded. "On my mark, then step back." The key slid in, clicked, and the door cracked open. Inside was the usual mess of a high schooler's life. Textbooks stacked sideways, a pair of muddy sneakers, a crumpled hoodie that smelled faintly of Axe body spray. But shoved behind it all was something else. A black duffel bag, zipped tight, heavy-looking. Apollo lunged, barking so violently that Ryan had to grip the harness to hold him back. The shepherd's teeth bared, saliva spraying with every bark. Whatever was in that bag, he wanted it out. Mrs. Harper gasped. What is that?" Ryan didn't answer. Not yet. He pulled the bag out, careful to keep it steady. The weight wasn't right. Too solid in places, too sloshy in others. He could feel Apollo's body trembling with focus, every muscle taut like a coiled spring. He set the duffel gently on the floor, one hand on Apollo's collar. He eased the zipper open just enough to peek inside. What he saw turned his stomach cold. Plastic containers, tubing, something that didn't belong anywhere near a high school hallway. He zipped it back up before Mrs. Harper could see. Her voice trembled. Officer Cooper? He met her eyes steady. We need to get this tested, right now. Clear the area. She hesitated. Should I call the boy who owns this locker? Ryan's jaw tightened. Not yet. Apollo growled again, deep and relentless. This was no ordinary locker check. Halfway through the tense silence, Ryan caught his own reflection in the metal doors around him. A man in uniform, tired eyes haunted by the years overseas, and now burdened with protecting teenagers who thought they were invincible. He realized something else. Without Apollo, he never would have known. And here's where you, as the reader, need to lean in. Stories like this matter. If you want to keep following Apollo's instincts, don't miss what comes next. Hit that subscribe button. It keeps you connected to every twist and every truth that comes to light. Ryan carried the duffel into the small security office beside the gym, Apollo close at his heel. The shepherd's eyes never left the bag, as though the danger inside might crawl out if left unattended. On the desk, Ryan set it down and snapped on gloves. Mrs. Harper wrung her hands. Do you think it's what I'm afraid it is? He didn't answer. Not until he knew for sure. Apollo sat but didn't relax. His ears were sharp, his stare unblinking. Body rigid with that same unnatural energy. Ryan opened the bag wider this time. The items inside were arranged too carefully to be random. Plastic bottles labeled with chemical names, a notebook, pages filled with calculations and hand-drawn diagrams. The handwriting was neat, almost obsessive. Ryan felt the weight of it hit his chest. He'd seen things like this before, but never in a school, never tied to a teenager's name. He pulled the notebook out slowly, flipping to the first page. Scribbles of formulas, arrows pointing toward words like mixture and reaction. His throat dried. He turned another page. More diagrams, this time of hallways. The school's hallways. He closed it fast, breathing hard. Mrs. Harper's voice broke the silence. Whose locker is it? Ryan hesitated. He wasn't ready to say, not out loud. Instead, he looked at Apollo. The dog stared back, his chest rising and falling, the steady thump of his tail hitting the floor in slow rhythm. Waiting, knowing. Ryan finally spoke, quiet but firm. This isn't over, not by a long shot. And as the bell rang for second period, echoing down the now empty hallways, the truth was clear. Jefferson High's ordinary morning had just ended. The real story, the one Apollo had sniffed out, was only beginning. The bell for second period had long since echoed down the empty halls, but Officer Ryan Cooper's mind wasn't on schedules or tardy slips. His eyes stayed fixed on the duffel bag spread open on the desk in front of him. Apollo sat rigidly by his side, ears perked, body angled toward the chemical containers inside, as though the danger itself had a heartbeat he could hear. Ryan flipped another page of the notebook, careful not to smudge the ink with his gloved hands. The sketches inside were disturbingly precise, hallways drawn with ruler straight lines, arrows pointing toward stairwells, notations beside classrooms. It wasn't random doodling. Whoever had written this had planned something that didn't belong in a high school. Mrs. Harper paced behind him, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Tell me this isn't what it looks like. Ryan shut the notebook. It looks bad. Her face paled. She lowered herself into the chair across the desk, her voice trembling. Ryan, if this gets out, parents, the school board, then we'll handle it, he cut in. But right now, my job is to make sure this place is safe. Apollo growled low, his nose hovering inches above the duffel. His tail thumped once, not in excitement, but in warning. Ryan knew that sound. He'd heard it in Afghanistan, in bomb-sniffing drills gone live. This wasn't a game. The security office suddenly felt smaller, the fluorescent light harsher. Ryan picked up the duffel, zipped it shut, and said, I'm taking this to the station. We'll get it tested, figure out exactly what we're dealing with. Mrs. Harper's eyes followed him nervously. And the student? Whose locker? I'll find him, Ryan said, not ready to speak the name yet. But we do this by the book. No rumors, no panic. The cruiser's engine hummed as Ryan drove toward the precinct. Apollo in the back seat, panting softly, eyes alert to every passing car. The dog's head tilted now and then, ears twitching like antennae tuned to a frequency Ryan couldn't hear. Ryan gripped the wheel tighter. He kept thinking of Locker 217, of how normal it had looked until Apollo froze. He thought of the diagrams in that notebook, the care, the obsession. It didn't feel like a prank. Kids pulled fire alarms or spray-painted bathroom stalls. This was something else. Something darker. At the precinct, the evidence techs took the duffel with careful hands. One of them, an older guy named Frank with 30 years in the department, muttered, "Looks like lab stuff, but why here?" Ryan didn't answer. His focus stayed on Apollo, who hadn't taken his eyes off the bag until it disappeared through the double doors of the evidence room. Only then did the shepherd relax, stretching out with a heavy sigh as though saying, "Your turn now, humans." Back at Jefferson High, the day stumbled forward like nothing had happened. Students filled the cafeteria with the smell of fries and pizza pockets. Football posters fluttered on bulletin boards, and the band practiced a muffled tune in the music wing. But Ryan's absence was noticed. Whispers spread fast, as they always did in small towns. By the time he returned late that afternoon, at least half the student body had heard some version of the story. A dog barking at a locker, a cop pulling out a mysterious bag, maybe even a bomb. Ryan walked back through the halls, Apollo at his heel, ignoring the sideways stares. He wasn't ready to explain. Not yet. Mrs. Harper cornered him outside her office. "Well, the lab's running tests. Could take days," Ryan said. "And the student?" Ryan exhaled. "Michael Turner, sophomore. Quiet kid, good grades. Teachers say he's polite. No record." Her eyes widened. "That doesn't make sense. His parents are—" "I know who they are," Ryan cut in. The Turners were church-going, active in the PTA, the kind of family people pointed to as model citizens, which only made the whole thing feel stranger. Mrs. Harper's voice dropped. "Do you think he's dangerous?" Ryan glanced down at Apollo. The shepherd's gaze had fixed on a group of lockers further down the hall. His ears twitched. His nose lifted, catching a scent invisible to everyone else. Ryan's pulse jumped. "We're not done here." Apollo moved with purpose, pulling Ryan toward the science wing. The shepherd's claws clicked against the tile, his tail straight as a line. Students still lingering after school flattened themselves against the walls, watching curiously. He stopped at the chemistry lab. The door was locked, lights off. Ryan tested the handle, then knocked until the janitor arrived. "Open it," he ordered. The janitor hesitated. What's he looking for now? "Just open it." The door creaked, and the smell of chemicals drifted out, faint but distinct. Apollo darted inside, nose sweeping the room like a radar. He moved straight to the supply closet, scratching furiously at the bottom shelf. Ryan pulled the door wide. Behind the neatly stacked cleaning supplies was a cardboard box shoved deep into the shadows. He slid it out, heart pounding. Inside were more containers, labeled, measured, not stolen from the school supply cabinet. These were purchased somewhere else, collected intentionally. Mrs. Harper gasped behind him. Dear God. Ryan's stomach turned. This wasn't a one-time stash. This was stockpiling. He bagged the box for evidence. "Lock this lab until further notice," he told the janitor. Apollo whined softly, circling back toward the hallway. He wasn't finished. By the time Ryan got home that night, exhaustion weighed heavy on him. His modest ranch-style house sat at the edge of town, the kind of place with a flagpole in the front yard and a basketball hoop tilted over the driveway. He led Apollo out into the backyard, watching as the shepherd prowled the fence line before finally settling under the porch light. Ryan leaned against the railing, scrubbing a hand over his face. He thought about his daughter, Emily, 13 and too sharp for her own good. She'd be walking these same halls tomorrow, oblivious to the danger her dog had just uncovered. The thought made his stomach twist. Inside, he microwaved leftovers, flipping on the news. No mention of the school. Yet. But it was only a matter of time before parents started demanding answers. Apollo patted in, nudging his leg. The shepherd's eyes gleamed in the glow of the TV, steady and knowing. "You saved lives today, buddy," Ryan murmured. "But I get the feeling this isn't over." Apollo's tail brushed the floor once. Agreement. The next morning, Jefferson High buzzed with tension. Students whispered in corners. Teachers shot nervous glances at one another. The locker where it all started was taped off, a pale strip of yellow that looked out of place against the chip blue paint. Michael Turner walked in just before first period, head down, hoodie pulled tight. His classmates stared but didn't speak. Ryan watched from the end of the hall, Apollo sitting calmly at his side. The boy's eyes flicked up once, just long enough to meet the shepherd's gaze. His face blanched. He turned sharply and disappeared into the crowd. Ryan felt it in his gut. The kid knew. Whether guilty or afraid, Michael knew what was in that locker. He rested a hand on Apollo's harness. "Stay sharp, boy. We're going to find out the truth." And for the first time in his years on the job, Ryan realized the halls of Jefferson High weren't as safe as they seemed. Not anymore. The morning after the chemistry lab discovery, Jefferson High moved under a cloud of unease. Students shuffled through the halls with wide eyes, whispers trailing like smoke. No official announcement had been made. Mrs. Harper wanted to avoid panic, but teenagers didn't need confirmation to spin rumors. Some said a bomb had been found. Others swore it was drugs, or even a dead body stuffed in a bag. The truth was stranger, darker, and Ryan Cooper wasn't ready to share it. Not yet. He stood at his usual post near the main entrance, Apollo sitting tall beside him. The shepherd's calm presence drew curious glances, some admiring, some fearful. Kids respected Apollo in a way they never did adults. He wasn't a lecture or a detention slip. He was raw instinct, four paws and a nose that never lied. Michael Turner entered just after the late bell. His hoodie was pulled low, his backpack hanging heavy on one shoulder. He didn't make eye contact, not with Ryan, not with Apollo, not with anyone. He slid through the hall like a shadow, disappearing toward the sophomore wing. Apollo's ears flicked, his head turned, nose twitching. A low rumble built in his throat. Ryan tightened his grip on the leash. "You smell it too, huh?" The shepherd rose, muscles taut, pulling against the harness. Ryan let him guide the way. Michael's locker had been emptied, sealed, taped off with evidence tags. But Apollo wasn't fixated there anymore. He moved past it, pulling Ryan toward the stairwell that led down to the gym and the boiler room. The hall was quiet. Class was in session. The only sounds were the rhythmic jingle of Apollo's tags and the steady pound of Ryan's boots on the floor. At the base of the stairs, Apollo froze again. His body went rigid, his nose pressing against the metal door that led to the maintenance hallway. Ryan's gut clenched. "What is it, boy?" Apollo barked once, sharp and insistent. Ryan tried the handle, locked. He radioed in. "Need a key for the maintenance hall, south stairwell. Bring it now." Within minutes, the janitor arrived, fumbling with the ring of brass keys. He unlocked the door, muttering, "Nothing down here but pipes and dust." Apollo surged forward as the door swung open, nearly pulling Ryan off balance. His nails scraped across the concrete floor as he followed the scent deeper into the narrow hall. The air was damp, metallic, carrying the hum of the school's old boiler system. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering in places. Apollo's growl deepened. He stopped at a utility closet halfway down, clawing at the base of the door with furious intent. Ryan's heart hammered. "Step back," he ordered the janitor. He braced himself, turned the knob, and pulled the door wide. At first glance, it looked like any storage space. Mops leaning against the wall, buckets stacked, the faint stink of bleach. But Apollo lunged toward the corner, nose bearing into a pile of cardboard boxes. His barks were explosive, echoing down the hall. Ryan yanked the boxes out one by one. Hidden beneath them was a black plastic container. Lid snapped tight. He dragged it into the open. Apollo snarled at it, teeth flashing, fur standing on end. Ryan crouched, easing the lid open. Inside were more chemicals. Different brands, more industrial. The kind you couldn't just grab at the local hardware store. Alongside them were glass jars, wires coiled neatly, and another notebook. This one chilled him even more than the first. The cover was marked with a single word scrawled in bold letters. Test. He flipped it open. The first page wasn't formulas. It was a list. Names. Dozens of them, students' names. Some were circled. Others had dates next to them. Ryan's breath caught. He recognized the names. Football players, band kids, even his own daughter's best friend. "Jesus," he whispered. The janitor stepped back, shaking his head. "This is bad, Officer Cooper." Ryan snapped the book shut, forcing himself to stay composed. Panic wouldn't help. "Get Mrs. Harper, now!" Back upstairs, Mrs. Harper's face drained of color when she saw the container in the notebook. "We have to call their parents. We have to—" "Not yet," Ryan said firmly. "We don't know what this is for. It could be a scare tactic. Could be someone framing the kid. Until we know, we keep this contained." Apollo circled the box, barking once more before sitting heavily, his amber eyes never leaving it. Ryan knew the dog was right. This wasn't over. That evening, Ryan sat at his kitchen table with the notebook laid open under a lamp. Apollo lay at his feet, head resting on his paws, eyes alert. He traced the list of names with his finger. The circled ones stood out like bruises. None of them were random. They were kids who'd all been part of the same after-school program. Science club. Ryan's mind worked overtime. Was this some kind of twisted experiment? A threat? He turned another page. More diagrams. This time not of hallways but of classrooms. Specific desks marked with X's. He closed the notebook, stomach tight. Emily, his daughter, was part of that science club. The thought hit him like a punch to the gut. The next morning, Ryan walked Emily to school himself. She rolled her eyes, embarrassed. "Dad, you don't have to. I'm not 5. "Humor me," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Apollo padded beside them, drawing smiles from passing neighbors. To most people, he was just a dog in a vest. To Ryan, he was the thin line between safety and disaster. At the entrance, Emily darted off to meet her friends. Ryan watched her go, unease heavy in his chest. Apollo whined, tugging him toward the cafeteria. "All right, buddy, lead the way." Inside, the smell of reheated eggs and syrup hung thick in the air. Students laughed, traded homework answers, scrolled through phones. Normal. Too normal. Apollo didn't care. His nose was locked on something else. He moved straight to the back wall, to a row of unused lockers near the vending machines. His paw scraped against one. Ryan's heart thudded. Another locker, another secret. He called the custodian again, who looked at him like he was cursed. "If that dog keeps finding things, I'm quitting," the man muttered, unlocking the metal door. The locker swung open, empty shelves, no books, no bags. Then Apollo barked, nose buried in the top corner. Ryan reached up, hand brushing against something taped to the underside of the shelf. He peeled it loose, a flash drive. Small, harmless looking, but heavy with implication. Apollo sat, tail thumping once, his job was done. Ryan pocketed the drive, mind already racing. That night, in the quiet of his home office, Ryan plugged the flash drive into his laptop. Apollo sat in the doorway, a silent sentinel. Folders popped up on the screen, dozens of them, labeled with dates, some recent, some stretching back months. He clicked one. Images filled the screen, photos of students, candid shots taken in hallways, classrooms, even the parking lot. Every student on the list. He clicked another folder. Documents appeared, detailed logs of behavior, who sat where, who hung out with whom, who left early, who stayed late. It wasn't just a plan, it was surveillance. Ryan's blood ran cold. Someone had been watching these kids for months, cataloging them, choosing them. And thanks to Apollo, the truth was starting to surface. But this wasn't the end, not even close. Ryan shut the laptop, rubbing his eyes. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing harder than ever. Apollo patted over, resting his head against Ryan's knee. The shepherd's steady gaze seemed to say, "We're not done. Keep going." Ryan exhaled, nodding to himself. "All right, boy. Tomorrow we dig deeper, no matter where it leads." Because Jefferson High wasn't just hiding secrets in lockers anymore. It was hiding something far worse. The flash drive had left Ryan staring at his laptop screen long after midnight, his heart pounding harder than it had in years. The images, students photographed in hallways, classrooms, even the parking lot, felt invasive, sinister. And the logs, written with unnerving precision, suggested this wasn't the work of a bored teenager pulling a prank. Somebody was watching. Somebody was tracking patterns, taking notes, and making plans. And now Ryan couldn't unsee it. By the time dawn broke, Ryan had made coffee so strong it tasted like burnt metal. He sat at the kitchen table in his plain white undershirt, staring at the notebook and flash drive side by side. Apollo lying under the chair with his head resting on Ryan's bare feet. "You knew before I did," Ryan muttered, reaching down to scratch behind the shepherd's ear. "You always do." Apollo's amber eyes flicked up, steady, unblinking. Ryan's phone buzzed across the table. It was Captain Harris from the precinct. "Cooper," the gruff voice came through. "Lab finished a preliminary test on those chemicals. Nothing that should have been in a school locker. Mixed wrong, it's poison. Mixed right, it's worse." Ryan pinched the bridge of his nose. "Explosive? Potentially, but that's not the point." Harris sighed. "We checked purchasing records. Some of those containers weren't bought by kids. They came through a supplier in Columbus. Licensed business to business. Someone older had to place that order." Ryan's chest tightened. "So it's not just Michael?" Not by a long shot. By the time Ryan pulled into Jefferson High that morning, the school was buzzing with the kind of nervous energy you couldn't suppress. Parents were starting to call in, demanding to know why police cruisers had been seen near campus 2 days in a row. Teachers whispered in the break room, trying to piece together half-truths. Ryan walked the halls, Apollo at his side, projecting calm he didn't feel. Michael Turner sat alone in homeroom, shoulders hunched, earbuds jammed in. He looked less like a criminal mastermind and more like a scared kid drowning in rumors. But Ryan couldn't shake the image of those notebooks. The precision, the names, the surveillance. He stood in the doorway for a beat too long. Michael glanced up, his eyes darting first to Ryan, then to Apollo. The boy froze. His lips parted like he wanted to speak, then snapped shut. He looked away. Apollo whined softly, leaning forward as though to close the distance. Ryan made a note in his head. He needed to talk to Michael, alone. That afternoon, Apollo led him somewhere new. It started in the cafeteria again. Ryan had walked through a dozen times since yesterday, but today Apollo caught something different. His nose twitched, his head jerked toward the far corner near the vending machines. Ryan followed, heart quickening. The shepherd pawed at the floor, claws scraping linoleum. Ryan knelt, pushing aside a loose floor tile. Beneath it was a plastic envelope, sealed tight. Inside, more flash drives. 3 of them. Apollo barked once, sharp and certain. Ryan pocketed the drives immediately. Too risky to check on a school computer. He'd review them later, after hours. When the final bell rang, Ryan asked Michael to stay after class. The boy hesitated, stuffing his notebooks into his backpack. "Relax," Ryan said softly, Apollo sitting obediently at his heel. "I just want to talk." Michael didn't move closer. His hands gripped the strap of his bag so tight his knuckles whitened. "I didn't put that stuff in the locker," he blurted suddenly, his voice cracking. "I swear." Ryan studied him. "Then who did?" Michael's eyes flicked toward Apollo, then back to Ryan. "You wouldn't believe me. Try me." Michael swallowed hard. "I think someone's using me, using my name, my locker. I never bought any chemicals, but they told me if I didn't let them use it, they'd—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Ryan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "They'd what, Michael?" The boy's eyes brimmed with fear. "They said they'd hurt my sister." Ryan's blood ran cold. Apollo growled low, sensing the boy's fear like a pulse in the air. That night, Ryan plugged in the new flash drives at his kitchen desk. Apollo sat beside him, alert, as if guarding the room itself. The files on these drives were different from the first. Less about names, more about schedules. Bell times, emergency exit routes, security camera blind spots. One folder stopped Ryan cold. It was labeled simply, "Game Night." He clicked it open. Inside were diagrams of the football field, bleachers, concession stands. Notes about the upcoming Friday night game circled in red. Every kid in town would be there. Ryan leaned back, heart pounding. This wasn't about the school anymore. This was about the community. And the timeline was shorter than he'd feared. The next morning, Ryan pulled Captain Harris aside at the station. "We can't keep this quiet anymore. Whoever's behind this, they're planning something at the football game." Harris rubbed his temples. "You have proof?" Ryan slid the flash drive across the desk. "More than enough." Harris cursed under his breath. "All right, we'll put units on standby. Quietly, can't spook the town unless we're sure." Ryan knew what that meant. It would come down to him and Apollo to find the final piece. The link that tied all this together. That afternoon, Apollo made the connection. They were patrolling near the gym when the dog suddenly stopped, nose pressing against the bleachers stacked against the wall. He barked, loud enough to startle the students in the next hallway. Ryan pulled the bleachers out just enough to squeeze behind. There, taped to the wall, was another envelope. Inside was a set of printed emails. Ryan scanned them quickly, his stomach dropping with every line. The sender wasn't a student. It was someone older. Someone who signed their messages only with initials, RC. The emails spoke of supplies secured, storage handled, and final test on Friday. Ryan folded the papers, sliding them into his jacket. Apollo's growl echoed the storm brewing in his chest. This wasn't just Michael. This was organized. That evening, Ryan sat on his porch while Apollo sprawled across the steps. Eyes half closed, but ears still twitching at every passing sound. The neighborhood was quiet. Kids riding bikes, a neighbor grilling steaks, the sound of cicadas buzzing in the trees. It all looked so normal, and yet Ryan knew normal was a fragile illusion. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "We've got a few days, boy, that's all. Whatever this is, whoever's behind it, they're going to make a move soon." Apollo lifted his head, watching Ryan with steady intensity. Ryan reached down, ruffling the shepherd's fur. "And we're going to stop them." The dog's tail thumped against the porch wood, slow and certain. Friday was closing in fast, and Jefferson High's secrets weren't staying buried much longer. Friday night in small-town Ohio has a way of making everything feel simple. The field lights flipped on like a sunrise and fast forward, pouring gold over the bleachers. A marching band warmed up in sharp bursts, brass ringing across the parking lot. Parents in folding camp chairs staked out spots. Teenagers swarmed the concession stand as if the nachos were oxygen. The Jefferson Eagles were playing their rivals from 2 towns over, and for a while the only tension was whether the quarterback's shoulder would hold. Officer Ryan Cooper stood at the north gate with Apollo at heel, the German shepherd's vest snug against his ribs. Apollo's ears turned like twin satellites, soaking in the flood of sound. Cheers, whistles, squeaks of sneakers on the track. Ryan tried to let the normalcy settle into him like a calming breeze. But normalcy didn't stick after what he'd seen on those flash drives. He'd read the words game night too many times. He'd traced arrows on printed maps that circled the bleachers and marked emergency exits. He knew this, whatever it was, wasn't just about a locker anymore. The PA announced the color guard, and the crowd stood. Apollo stood too, as if the ceremony itself demanded focus. Ryan glanced across the field to where 2 uniformed officers posted up by the home side tunnel. Captain Harris wanted presence, but not panic. Keep things quiet until they had something concrete. Concrete, Ryan thought, had been Apollo's nose for 3 days straight. "Evening, officer," a father in a Letterman jacket said as he scanned tickets. "Boy looks sharp tonight." "He always does," Ryan said and meant it. The national anthem cut through the hum of the crowd. Apollo didn't flinch. He had that still, ancient calm of a dog who'd learned to trust his senses first and everything else after. When the last note faded and the crowd roared, the shepherd blinked up at Ryan as if to say, "Now we work." They walked the perimeter once, then again. Apollo sniffed the base of the bleachers, the edges of trash cans, the hollow under the press box stairs. Nothing. He looked bored in the way only a working dog could. Head high, moving, waiting for the world to make sense. On their third pass, near the visitor's side, he stopped. The change was small, just a pause, a tilt of the head. Ryan felt the line go tight in his hand. "You got something?" he murmured. Apollo's nose tracked the air, not the ground. He inhaled, slow and deliberate, then turned toward the concession stand. Ryan followed, pace casual, eyes scanning faces in the crowd. A cluster of band parents laughing over hot chocolate, a group of cheerleaders trading scrunchies, a couple of seniors who kept shifting their eyes away, like guilt was a jacket they couldn't take off. At the corner of the concession stand, Apollo sat. Not the slam-bark scratch of a hard alert. This was a quiet signal. He lifted one paw and touched the cinder block wall. Ryan's stomach knotted. He put a hand to the dog's collar, just to steady himself. "Captain," he said into the mic at his shoulder, "I've got to sit at the home concession stand, northwest corner." "Copy," came Harris's voice. "You sure?" "It's a behavior I trust." "Don't spook the crowd." Ryan moved closer to the wall. It was just gray block, patched where a plumber had cut a square out years back and sealed it. He knocked once, lightly. Solid then. Not as solid. He couldn't tell. Apollo stood and paced the line of the wall, nose brushing the mortar, then sat again at the patched square. He lifted his paw to it a second time. "Okay," Ryan breathed. He pulled the concession manager aside. A woman in a sweatshirt dusted with salt from pretzels. "Can you have your crew step back for a minute? Keep selling at the far window." "We're slammed." "I know, just trust me." She took one look at Apollo and nodded, seeing something in the dog that made argument feel pointless. Harris arrived with another officer and a small, unassuming bag that held tools nobody wanted to see in public. Ryan gave a short, quiet brief. "We don't open anything until we clear the inside first. No crowds near this corner. We do this clean." They entered through the back door of the stand where a teenage volunteer was pumping cheese from a warm bag into trays. He froze when he saw the vests and the dog. We out of cups?" "You're doing great," Ryan said with a chin nod. "Take 5. Apollo pulled toward the inner side of the same wall. He breathed in, then gave a low, questioning whine that tightened Ryan's chest. The shepherd wasn't panicking. He was telling them the scent was here too. Ryan ran his fingers along a seam where the patch block met the original. He felt the faintest draft, cold Ohio air bleeding through. "Captain," he said quietly, If there's something back there, it's small, hidden. Then we go slow, Harris said. He controlled the scene with quiet efficiency, moving the concession crew to the opposite window, keeping the fryers running so people wouldn't notice. The band struck up a fight song, loud enough to cover the muffled sound of a masonry blade nicking mortar. Ryan crouched to Apollo's level. "Stay," he ordered. The dog lay down, front paws out, chin flat, eyes locked on the wall. Harris cut the patch free in a neat square. The block slid forward on a tiny hinge they hadn't seen. Behind it, a cavity the size of a shoebox yawned dark. Ryan's breath stalled. He reached in with a gloved hand. A bag, plastic, sealed, a chemical smell, faint but wrong, and a device with wires coiled like a nest, attached to a small, black rectangle. Not a phone, not familiar enough to name, just wrong. Harris didn't swear. He never did when it mattered most. He slid the bag into a blast-safe container and latched it, hands steady like this was his living room and not a football game breathing down on the other side of the wall. "We're good," he said. "We're good. Keep it quiet." Ryan stood slowly, hand on Apollo's harness. The shepherd didn't move. He watched. He listened. He waited for the next thing, because there was always a next thing. "Could be a decoy," Harris murmured as they stepped out into the cool air again, the roar of a kickoff swallowing their words. "We'll get the techs on it, but, Cooper, your dog had it right. This was placed with intent." "RC," Ryan said. The initials tasted like metal in his mouth. "They're here, or watching." Harris gave him a look that said he didn't disagree. They resumed their walk, neither pretending the night had gone back to normal. Apollo tugged toward the south bleachers this time, then stopped short, confused, nose lifting, then dropping, as if the scent split in two. Ryan felt it in his bones. Whoever had done this had planned for movement, for crowds, for noise and chaos that could hide anything. A burst of cheers ripped across the field as Jefferson returned a punt for 25 yards. The bleachers shook with stomping. A student section chant rose in waves. And in the middle of it, Apollo turned his head sharply toward the press box. Ryan followed the gaze. On the second level, a volunteer announcer leaned into the mic. A couple of students fiddled with audio cables. A man in a ball cap stood at the far window, looking out over the field, hands in pockets. Nothing unusual, except his attention wasn't on the play. It drifted along the perimeter, calculating. Apollo's lips parted, not a growl, just breath. He lifted his nose higher. Ryan keyed his mic. "Captain, I want a quiet look at the press box." "On it," Harris replied. "You, me, and the dog. No one else." They climbed the iron steps as the band launched into the fight song. The door stuck for a second, then gave. The room smelled like dusty carpet and coffee. The announcer spun around with a friendly startle. "Oh, Officer Cooper, everything okay?" "Routine," Ryan lied with a smile. He let his eyes past the announcer, past the kids at the soundboard, and land on the man in the cap. Late 40s, maybe 50. Windbreaker zipped to the throat, clean-shaven. His eyes didn't stick to any one thing too long. "Evening," the man said, as neutral as the sky. He watched the dog without fear, without fondness, like someone considering a tool. "What's your role up here?" Harris asked casual. "Helping with stats," the man replied, lifting a laminated pass on a lanyard. "Roy Collins, Booster Club." The initials snapped like a mousetrap in Ryan's head. "RC, new face," Ryan said lightly. "I know most of the boosters. Moved back to town recently. Kids graduated ages ago, but you know how it is. Friday nights pull you back." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Apollo chose that exact moment to nose along the base of the far wall. He stopped at a metal utility cabinet with a simple latch. He sat, paw up, quiet, precise. Ryan's pulse stuttered. He turned to Collins and kept his voice easy. "Mind if we pop this open?" "Routine safety check." "Of course," Collins said, spreading his hands. His eyes tracked Harris, not the cabinet. His jaw flexed once. Harris flipped the latch. Inside, coiled extension cords, a spare mic, a portable battery pack, and, taped to the back, a plastic pouch with a tiny black disc no bigger than a coin. Not a bomb. A camera, a transmitter, a way to watch without being seen. "Looks like we have a privacy issue," Harris said softly, hand covering the device with a small evidence bag as if he were just tidying up. He smiled at the announcer. "We'll take this to avoid any mishaps." "Sure," the announcer said, bewildered and eager to stay out of it. Collins's expression didn't change. Not fear, not outrage, just a faint twitch near the eye that could have been annoyance or calculation. Ryan thanked everyone and stepped back into the night air with Apollo. The dog shook out his fur, then leaned on Ryan's leg in that grounding way he did after finding something important. Harris's voice was low but electric. If he's RC, he knows we know. He placed a camera in the press box, Ryan said. He's mapped the exits. He used a business account to buy chemicals. He's got a kid on the hook with a threat to his sister. This isn't nostalgia bringing him back to town. It's convenience. Or revenge, Harris muttered. The crowd roared again, startled into joy as Jefferson scored. The band exploded into drums, and with it, Apollo whipped his head toward the South Concourse, body stiff. He pulled hard enough that Ryan stumbled a half step. The shepherd lunged down the metal steps, nose to the wind, ignoring the cheerleaders waving pom-poms as they made way. Go, Harris said, already moving. They pushed through a knot of parents. A toddler cried. Someone dropped a tray of popcorn. Apollo drilled forward, zeroing in on a maintenance gate half shaded by a vendor banner. He shoved his nose under the flap. The banner swayed back to reveal a cart tucked into the dark, as if someone had left it mid-task and vanished. Apollo barked, 1, 2, 3 sharp reports that turned heads. Ryan yanked the banner aside. The cart held cleaning supplies and a duffel like the one from the locker, smaller, the zipper half open as if dropped in a rush. Inside, plastic bottles, rags, note cards with time scribbled in block letters. Not instructions, reminders. Meet, move, trigger. Each word was vague enough to mean nothing and specific enough to scare him. Footsteps scraped. Ryan turned. Collins stood 5 yards away, hands still in his pockets, as average as any other middle-aged man at a football game, which is to say invisible until he wasn't. Lose something? Ryan asked, voice flat. Collins' eyes flicked to the cart, then to Apollo. For the first time, a crack in the composure. A flare of irritation, almost pitying, like a chess player caught a move too soon. Officer, he said, tone calm, you seem jumpy for a Friday night. Funny, Ryan said. You seem very relaxed for a man who just watched my dog find your second stash. Third, Collins said before he could stop himself. Everything narrowed to a single point. Harris's footfalls landed behind Ryan, solid. The band crashed into a cymbal roll like a movie score, deciding the moment mattered. You're under suspicion, Harris said, his voice calm as winter. We're going to step somewhere private and talk. Collins smiled, small and infuriating. Of course, Captain. Anything to help. He lifted his hand slowly. No weapon, no struggle, just compliance that felt like theater. Apollo didn't buy it. He pressed into Ryan's leg, eyes never leaving Collins' face. The dog knew when a storm wasn't over. He knew the pressure still waiting to break. They walked Collins under the bleachers, away from the crush of bodies and the bright light of the scoreboard. The air cooled. The hum of the crowd turned hollow. Somewhere overhead, a teenage voice yelled, "Go Eagles!" Like the world hadn't shifted. Collins stopped when Harris asked and leaned against a support beam as if he owned the place. You've done well, he said to Ryan, which made Ryan want to put him through the asphalt. Finding things is a talent. Keeping people safe is noble. Who are you working with? Harris asked. Collins shrugged. It's a big town when you know where to look. Your initials are on the emails, Ryan said. RC. Lots of Roys, Collins said. Lots of Collinses. Apollo's throat rumbled. He stepped forward, a silent, living line that Collins could not cross. Ryan imagined Michael Turner's sister. He imagined the list of circled names. He pictured the clean, neat handwriting of someone who'd been planning long before anyone smelled danger. You won't hurt these kids, he said, surprising himself with the heat in his voice. Not in this town, not tonight, not ever. Collins' smile thinned. That's the trouble with towns like this, Officer Cooper. You think nothing bad can happen because you put a dog at the gate. Ryan leaned in, letting the words cut and fall. This dog saved you from spending the night in a morgue. For a heartbeat, something like respect flickered in Collins' eyes. Then it was gone. You have the wrong picture, he said quietly, and part of you knows it. Harris read him no poetry. He cuffed the man with practiced precision and started the Miranda rights while Collins listened like it was a bedtime story he'd heard before. The crowd roared as Jefferson intercepted a pass and ran it back. The town surged with joy. Under the bleachers, the world was all echo and metal, and the steady breathing of a dog who had not yet exhaled. Because Apollo knew the scent threads weren't finished. The wall device was one piece, the card another, the camera a third, the man a face on a network. Ryan glanced down. Apollo stared past Collins into the dark run of the concourse, ears rigid, nose tasting air that didn't belong to hot dogs and fall leaves. "Captain," Ryan said, that old Marine steel tightening his gut, "this isn't over." Harris didn't look surprised. "Then we stay on our feet." Apollo stood, muscles ready, eyes bright in the stadium glow. Somewhere a whistle blew, somewhere a drum line rolled. Somewhere the next clue waited for a dog to find it. And Ryan, hand on the harness, followed the pull he trusted more than anything. The quiet certainty of a partner who always smelled the truth first. The sound of the handcuffs locking around Roy Collins's wrists should have been the end of the story. The crowd above was still roaring about the interception, the announcer's voice booming with joy, the band blaring out victory notes. But under the bleachers, Ryan Cooper knew the night hadn't truly shifted back to normal. Not even close. Apollo hadn't relaxed. The German shepherd stood stiff, nose lifted toward the concourse's dark stretch, his chest vibrating with a low, uneasy growl. He didn't look at Collins, didn't care about the man in cuffs. His instincts were telling him the threat wasn't over. Captain Harris noticed too. He tugged the chain connecting Collins's wrists. "Your dog still twitching?" "Yeah," Ryan said. He knelt beside Apollo, placing a steadying hand on the vest. "What are you smelling, buddy?" Apollo's ears flicked. He pulled hard toward the south end of the concourse, away from the noise of the bleachers, and toward the shadowed maintenance corridor that led out to the equipment sheds. Collins smirked, his voice steady even as Harris marched him forward. "Smart dog, but he's too late." Ryan's jaw clenched. "Shut it!" They pushed through the narrow hall until the crowd noise dimmed, leaving only the hum of the stadium lights and the crunch of gravel under boots. Apollo pulled them past a dumpster, toward a shed marked with peeling letters. "Field equipment only." The lock on the door was broken, the metal latch bent out of shape. "Looks fresh," Harris muttered. He shoved Collins against the wall and handed him off to another officer who jogged down to meet them. "Take him to the cruiser. Don't let him say a word to anyone." As Collins was led away, he glanced back once. His smile was thin, satisfied. That smile chilled Ryan worse than any chemical formula he'd found in a notebook. Apollo barked sharply, snapping Ryan back. The dog pawed at the door, nose jamming into the gap where the lock used to be. "All right, let's see," Ryan said. Harris and Ryan yanked the shed door open. The smell hit them first. Chemical and metallic, sharp enough to sting the back of the throat. Inside, stacked between soccer nets and spare helmets, were two black storage bins. Apollo lunged forward, barking so ferociously Ryan had to grip the harness with both hands. Ryan pried one bin open. Inside, plastic containers, funnels, a mess of tubing, and something worse, a half-built device, wires coiled around a digital timer that hadn't been set yet. His stomach dropped. "This was meant for tonight," Harris said flatly. "But Collins was just watching," Ryan said. "He didn't plant this. He didn't have time." Harris scanned the bins, his face tight. "Then someone else did." Apollo barked again, turning his head sharply to the far corner of the shed. Ryan followed his gaze. Another duffel bag, smaller than the first two they'd found, wedged behind a stack of baseball bats. Ryan dragged it out, unzipping it with careful hands. Inside was a black hoodie, gloves, and a laminated pass identical to the one Collins had flashed in the press box. Only this one didn't have his name on it. It was blank. "Someone else was supposed to be here tonight," Ryan whispered. By the time the bomb squad arrived, the game was nearly over. Parents filtered down the bleachers with blankets tucked under arms, kids buzzing from too much soda. Nobody had any idea how close the night had come to disaster. Ryan stood at the gate with Apollo, watching the crowd spill out into the parking lot, searching every face. He didn't know who else was part of this. He only knew Collins wasn't the end. Emily appeared among the crowd, laughing with her friends, hair pulled back under a Jefferson Eagles cap. Ryan's chest tightened. For one reckless second, he wanted to run to her, scoop her up, and drive far away. But he couldn't. His daughter wasn't just a kid in the stands anymore. She was a potential target in a plan that still hadn't been fully uncovered. Apollo whined softly, pressing against Ryan's leg. "I know," Ryan murmured, fingers brushing the shepherd's fur. "We'll keep her safe. We'll keep all of them safe." Back at the station, Collins sat in an interrogation room, his hands still cuffed, his smirk intact. The fluorescent light above flickered. Ryan and Harris stood behind the glass watching. "He's not scared," Harris said. "He should be, but he's not." "He thinks someone's still out there," Ryan replied. "Someone finishing what he started." As if on cue, Apollo growled from the corner of the observation room. He pressed his nose to the base of the door, then looked back at Ryan. "What is it now?" Ryan muttered, crouching beside him. Apollo pawed the floor, whining, then sat down firmly. His eyes locked on the interrogation room. Ryan frowned. "You think he's waiting for something?" Harris raised an eyebrow. "Or someone." An officer entered the interrogation room to deliver Collins a cup of water. Collins didn't even drink it. He just pushed it aside, leaned back in his chair and said, "You boys should let me go before Friday turns into Saturday." Ryan felt his blood run cold. "How the hell does he know what's left?" he asked Harris. "Because he's not working alone," Harris said. "He's just the face we caught." Ryan looked down at Apollo. The dog's steady gaze seemed to confirm it. They were only scratching the surface. Later that night, long after Collins had been processed and the evidence secured, Ryan sat at his kitchen table again. The flash drives and notebooks lay scattered across the wood like pieces of a puzzle missing its final edge. Apollo paced restlessly, circling the room, ears twitching at every creak of the house. Ryan rubbed his temples. He was tired down to his bones, but his mind wouldn't stop. He thought about the empty laminated pass, the second duffel bag, the way Collins's smile never faded. He thought about the names in the notebooks, the circled kids in the science club, and the words "game night" scrawled like a headline. It was too careful, too methodical, and Collins was too calm. "Who are you protecting?" Ryan muttered to the empty room. Apollo stopped pacing. He sat at Ryan's feet, staring at the table, then lifted his head and whined low. Ryan looked at the flash drives again, something clicking in his mind. He grabbed the laptop, plugged in one he hadn't fully checked. Folders popped up. Most were blank, but one file glowed at him. SaturdayPlan.docx. He clicked it. The document was short, just a few lines. Jefferson High Science Club, field trip departure, 7 a.m. Target confirmed. Ryan's stomach turned. Tomorrow morning. The plan wasn't just about the football game. That was the distraction. The real danger was scheduled for Saturday. He slammed the laptop shut, looking at Apollo. The dog's ears pricked, tail stiff, as if he understood the urgency. "We've got less than 10 hours, Ryan said, his voice hoarse. Apollo barked once, sharp and resolute. The house was silent except for the dog's breathing and the faint hum of the fridge. But Ryan's mind was loud, already racing through possibilities. A school trip meant buses, kids crammed together, teachers relaxed, thinking it was just another Saturday activity. And if Collins had a partner, or more than one, that's when they'd strike. Ryan stood grabbing his jacket, his badge, his radio. Apollo leapt to his side without hesitation. "Let's go, boy," Ryan said. "We're not letting them take Saturday." The shepherd's tail swished once, steady and strong. Together they stepped out into the cool Ohio night, headlights flaring as the cruiser roared to life. The game might have ended, but the real battle was only beginning. The alarm on Ryan's phone went off at 5:45 a.m., sharp and jarring. He was already awake, staring at the ceiling of his modest ranch house, mind too loud for sleep. The document from the flash drive still burned in his memory. Jefferson High Science Club, field trip, departure 7 a.m. Target confirmed. Next to the bed, Apollo lay sprawled but alert, ears twitching with every creak of the house. As soon as Ryan swung his feet to the floor, the shepherd rose in one fluid motion, ready for work. "Yeah, buddy," Ryan said, pulling on his uniform pants. "It's game time." The morning air outside bit sharp and cold, the kind of Ohio chill that clung to skin even in September. Ryan loaded Apollo into the cruiser and peeled out of the driveway, sirens off. He didn't want the whole neighborhood waking up before he got answers. By 6:45, the parking lot of Jefferson High was buzzing with sleepy teenagers in hoodies and backpacks. A yellow school bus idled, diesel fumes puffing into the gray sky. Teachers with coffee cups tried to corral the group into some kind of order. Ryan pulled up fast, flashing his lights once. Apollo barked from the back seat, the sharp sound cutting through the chatter like a whistle. Heads turned. Mrs. Harper was there, hair pulled tight as usual, her expression a mix of relief and fear. "Officer Cooper, what's going on? You can't just..." Yes, I can, Ryan interrupted, striding toward the bus with Apollo at his side. Nobody boards until I clear it. The students murmured, confusion rippling through the group. Michael Turner was among them, hoodie pulled tight, hands shoved in his pockets. He looked pale, exhausted, and scared. Apollo sniffed the air once, then pulled hard toward the bus. His claws clicked against the asphalt as he circled the front wheel well, nose brushing metal. Then with a sudden growl, he barked, loud, ferocious, and unrelenting. Gas rose from the students. Ryan raised his voice. Everyone back, away from the bus. Teachers herded the kids quickly, adrenaline cutting through the morning fog. Apollo didn't let up. He pawed at the undercarriage, teeth bared. Ryan dropped to his knees, heart hammering. He slid a flashlight under the bus. And there it was. A black box, duct taped to the frame, wires running across its surface like veins. Bomb squad now, Ryan barked into his radio. Mrs. Harper covered her mouth, her voice trembling. Oh my God! Ryan pulled Apollo back, holding the harness tight. The shepherd's eyes stayed locked on the box, his body vibrating with urgency. They evacuated the lot, moving students to the gym across the street. The bomb squad rolled in, their heavy suits making them look like astronauts. Ryan stayed with Apollo on the perimeter, every muscle tight, every breath shallow. When the techs emerged an hour later with the device safely contained, Ryan thought the nightmare might finally be over. But Apollo wasn't done. The shepherd's nose twitched. He pulled toward the line of backpacks stacked against the gym wall, left behind when the kids were evacuated. Ryan's stomach clenched. Not again. Apollo sniffed each bag quickly, dismissing most with a flick of his nose. Then he stopped at a navy blue one, sat sharply and lifted his paw. Ryan knelt, unzipping the bag slowly. Inside were books, a sweatshirt, and another flash drive taped to the lining. He held it up, bile rising in his throat. This wasn't just about a bomb under a bus. Whoever was behind this wanted to keep the game going. Inside the gym, Michael sat alone on the bleachers, staring at the floor. Ryan approached, Apollo at his side. You know something, Ryan said softly. Michael's eyes filled with tears. I didn't put it there, I swear. But I know who did. Ryan crouched in front of him. Tell me. Michael swallowed hard. It's not just Collins, it's a group. They call themselves the Clean Slate. They think the school's corrupt, that the whole town looks the other way. Collins told me they were going to make everyone pay attention. He said they needed someone young, someone nobody would suspect, to hold the keys. Ryan's fist tightened. Why you? Because I'm smart, Michael whispered bitterly. Because I keep to myself. Because nobody notices me. And because I was stupid enough to listen when they said my sister would be safe if I did what they wanted. Apollo pressed his head against Michael's knee, sensing the boy's fear. Michael broke then, sobbing into his hands. Ryan stood, his heart pounding. Harris needs to hear this. Now! By noon, Collins was back in interrogation. But this time, Ryan slammed the new flash drive onto the table. Game's over, he said. Collins just smiled that same thin smile. Is it? Ryan leaned in close. Your little clean slate? Michael's talking. We found your bus bomb. You're done. Collins tilted his head. Michael's just a pawn. You haven't touched the real players. They don't sit in cafeterias or booster clubs. They sit in offices. They sign checks. You think you've stopped something? All you've done is delay it. Apollo growled from the doorway, low and dangerous. Collins' smirk faltered for the first time. Ryan straightened. You underestimated the wrong dog. That night, exhausted but alive, Ryan sat on his porch steps. Apollo sprawled beside him, finally relaxed, his head heavy on Ryan's lap. The air smelled of cut grass and barbecue from a neighbor's yard. For the first time in days, the town seemed quiet. Emily came out, curling beside him with a blanket. Dad? Yeah? You think it's really over? Ryan stroked Apollo's fur, feeling the dog's steady breath. He looked out into the dark, the weight of Collins' words still heavy in his chest. I think we stopped something big, he said, and I think we've got more work to do. Emily leaned her head against his shoulder. Then it's good we've got Apollo. Ryan smiled faintly. Yeah, it's good we've got him. Apollo thumped his tail once, a sound as reassuring as any promise. The story of Jefferson High wasn't finished. The clean slate wasn't finished. But thanks to a German shepherd who trusted his nose, the town had been given another day, another chance. And sometimes, Ryan thought, that was all anyone could ask for. Thank you for following this story. What would you have done if you were in Officer Ryan's shoes? Would you have trusted Apollo's instincts from the very first bark?